Kaz Ayabe, the creator behind Boku No Natsuyasumi, once said in an interview that he wanted to give players the feeling of living their lives in fast forward. The effect of this glimpse into a life quickly lived is that we can begin to understand how apparently mundane choices have drastic influences over the lives of people around us, especially the children we raise. At the time of developing Bokura No Kazoku, Ayabe had been raising his own children for years, and when, at the age of 40, he looked back on his life, he had a realization. Quote, "I came to where I was so quickly. I had my childhood, grew up, and the next thing I knew I was 40. Bokura no Kazoku, meaning Our Family in Japanese, was developed by Millennium Kitchen for the PS2, focusing on the ordinary lives of adults and the important decisions they make as to their children's future. The game is a married life child-rearing simulator in which the player raises a family over a period of 35 years, from the age of 25 to 60. The player's choices at the start of the game locks them into a particular scenario in which they'll end up having a different number of children, each of whom has a unique personality. However, what happens over the course of the game will vary depending on the player's actions. At the beginning of each season, the parents are faced with decisions to make that affect their child's future. The personality and destiny of each child changes depending on how the player makes these decisions. There are a total of 15 different endings in which your children may or may not go to university, get married, get good jobs, or have children of their own. I don't have children, but I can imagine that many parents may secretly wonder what might have happened if they could have done things a little bit differently. Maybe their children ought to have had a bit more freedom. Maybe their children had too much freedom. When the game starts, Chiko and her husband are getting married and they quickly have their first child. Each child has various statistics that evolve over time, and their personality will range from introverted to extroverted, pure to mature, compassionate to icy. The last two gauges refer to the child's mental or physical stamina. Bokura no Kazoku is essentially all about manipulating these statistics by making major and minor decisions about their children's lives. Having more children means having to spread out your time more evenly between them, as well as your resources like money. Do you spend the day with one particular child who's been feeling lonely or needs more guidance? Or do you take out the whole family to the zoo? Some days you may choose simply to do nothing and save money for the future. Apparently innocuous decisions, such as going to the museum or choosing a specific kind of book to gift your child, has consequences. Importantly, the game distinguishes between your children being talented and growing up happily. Sometimes they manage to do both, but other times talent comes at the cost of happiness. Giving books has a variety of effects, turning daydreamers into scientists, making them more outgoing, or helping them mature. When giving books, the effect it's going to have over your child is explicitly stated. However, you can only give each book once. If you give a book to your first child to motivate them to study harder, your second child won't be able to receive the same gift at that same period of their life, even if they end up needing it more than the first child did. When your child turns 5, another important decision awaits you: which school to enroll them in. You may be tempted to send your first child to the best and most expensive private school, but this probably won't be possible if you've spent money taking the family out to the museum, aquarium, or other places. If you find yourself strapped for cash, you can send your child to public school at no personal cost, freeing you up to use your money in other ways, but possibly hindering the kind of job your child later gets, or even their sense of self-worth. Am I going to be alright? Your daughter wonders. As the game boots up to the title screen, we see Chiko and her husband playing on swings at the park. From here, we choose the scenario we want, and the game's opening sequence shows their marriage, along with quiet scenes of Tokyo life. Chiko and her husband met in their mid-20s, and life together begins simply but with great hope. One evening, shortly afterwards, Chiko brings out a gift for her husband, a journal, in which to record the daily events of their lives. Their first child, Moku, is born weighing just under 3 kilograms. Moku quickly becomes the center of their lives, despite his father's busy job editing children's books for Oedo Publishing. One morning after returning home from working overnight, the father arrives in time to hear his son's first words. Moku begins to grow up, and for reading material we give him Ganbari Kodomo Shinbun, the hard-working child newspaper, to increase his mental stamina. Then take him to the museum. Soon afterwards, our family welcomes their second child, a boy named Genkotsu, because his fists are tightly clenched at birth, as if ready to take on the world. Life gets busy, but Chiko reminds us to keep writing in our journal, so we record the incidents of Genkotsu's first words. For a book, we give him an exciting manga to make him more physically active. Meanwhile, Moku's been trying harder at everything he does. We promised to play with him on the weekend, but for now it's off to work. Later, our third child is born. We name her Pooh, and now things are really getting busy. Moku starts kindergarten, and as usual, does his best. For good luck, we take the whole family out to the local temple, the quietness and solitude of which makes everyone a little more introverted. The next day, we take just Genkotsu to Tokyo Tower. A day out with him makes him a little bit more mature. Interestingly, our choices of their first books have drastic influences on their personalities. For his whole life, Moku will struggle to find a balance between work and fun. Genkotsu is always just a little bit too energetic. Pooh, who gets a book about playing at the park to get more extroverted, becomes a chef, thriving in the chaos of the kitchen. They're all growing up fast. That night, Pooh asks about the origin of her nickname, and we tell her the truth. It's because she farted the day she was born. A revelation which I'm not sure she ever recovers from emotionally. But to make up for this, we treat her to a day at the park, which puts a smile back on that face. We keep saving money and working hard at the office. From here, the game starts to get a bit predictable, but never anything less than charming. The kids are growing up in front of our eyes. We help them through emotional ups and downs, and try to give them the kind of books they need for whatever problem they're facing. Before you know it, life is passing us by, and all those little moments start adding up. The kids join sports teams and get almost as tall as their father. They get their first jobs delivering newspapers, making burgers, or ramen. Soon they start having boyfriends and girlfriends. It's amusing and a bit touching to see these little kids looking more like tiny adults. This must be what it's like to be a parent, because in the parent's eyes, your children are still children, just bigger and dressed differently. As our kids enter adulthood, they follow their own paths. Moku goes to university, studying biology, and later becoming a journalist. But Genkotsu is the first child to get married, having met his girlfriend many years earlier. Moku has been working too hard, perhaps having been over-influenced by all those hard-working student newspapers we used to give him. During a class reunion, he reconnects with the former female classmate, and they get married a few years later. Somehow, both Genkotsu and Pooh have grown up to become chefs. But Pooh is a much harder worker and more serious than Genkotsu. She never meets anyone, and doesn't get married. As the game ends, 2 grandchildren have been born. The first to Genkotsu, and the second to Moku. Their father has kept a diary through all these years, and on his 60th year, the pages are full. The family gazes out at the garden, drinking warm tea. Bokura no Kazoku features character designs by Mineko Ueda, whose illustrations are delightfully simple, bright, and clean. Millennium Kitchen has done a wonderful job of bringing her drawings to life, which can be surprisingly expressive and show a huge range of subtle human emotion. Bokura no Kazoku also has some of the best cinematography that I've ever seen in a game. In fact, the backgrounds started out as photographs that were later reworked digitally, and the team took over 25,000 reference photos. The style is reminiscent of legendary Japanese filmmaker Yasujiro Ozu, whose works have a lot in common with the games developed by Ayabe, focusing on the lives of ordinary people doing ordinary things. The plot of Ozu's early film, Ohio, is about the strained but humorous relationship between the neighbors of a small Japanese town and their children, who go on a silence strike against their parents for being refused a new TV set.
こんにちは、おはよう、こんばんは。いいお天気ですね。ああ、そうですね。バカ。
Growing up, I would sometimes indulge in a fantasy about being transported back in time and being able to relive my life from a particular age. However, this fantasy always led me to a question that I've never been able to answer. If I could be transported back in time, would I make the same choices, or would I do things differently? Part of me wants to say that I'd make different decisions. I'd study harder, I'd go to a better university, and get a better paying job. But then another part of me thinks of all the amazing experiences I've had, and which I'd lose if I were to do things even slightly differently. I wouldn't have met the same people, I'd probably marry someone else, or maybe never gotten married at all. I would end up being a totally different person. Are we born some particular way that stays with us throughout our lives? An essential core defining us amidst endless superficial variability. If there's no essentially defining core, then who we are is our decisions. Though not everything in this life is under our control, every day faces us with a series of choices that eventually have major consequences. The trouble is, we don't always see the connecting thread between these decisions and their effects. Could a book we buy for our children, nieces, or nephew have a major influence on their personality? Could one special birthday present, say a video game, that our parents bought us in the 90s shape our lives irrevocably? So much of my personality is the result of an accident, of my mother buying me a game about a massive sword-wielding hero in 1997 at the age of 6 because I just so happened to be into swords at the time. But I doubt she could have seen the effect that game has had over my life. Bokura no Kazoku draws our attention to how our choices about ordinary things accumulate in unfathomable ways. At the end of our lives, what faces us is a vast network of mostly unintended consequences. Therefore, perhaps the message of Bokura no Kazoku is pay attention. It's certainly not the most immediately engaging or exciting game out there, but as far as games are able to speak to us on an existential level, Bokura no Kazoku is up there with the greats, not despite but because of the fact that its subject matter is purposefully and completely ordinary, and, like all of Ayabe's games, the beauty of the ordinary.